Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. So, this one is going to be a bit different compared to what I made before, but I'll explain why. A few weeks ago, I graduated high school, but before I did graduate, I had to make a senior thesis for my class. Basically, that means I need to learn something new, whether that be a life trait, a hobby you want to learn, or a skill for the job you want to do in college. I'm pretty sure you understand what I'll be learning from the video title. But anyhow, I decided to learn the Blender program to teach me how basic 3D animation works. Now, before we begin, I did have to edit some private information out of the video, since I did show this video in front of my English class. So, if there are any weird edits or cuts or anything, you know why. Anyway, without further ado, here's my senior thesis, learning how to use the Blender program. For my senior thesis, I am learning how to use the Blender program. However, before we get into that, I want to tell you about my history in animation and why I decided to do this for this project. For the past 7 years, I've been interested in animation. I started this journey when I was 12 with stop-motion animation. This soon evolved from a hobby to a realization that I wanted to pursue animation as a career. It takes a lot of effort, patience, and dedication, but the result is satisfying. When I discovered I wanted to make animation my job, I decided I wanted to do 3D animation specifically, as I can't draw. I took a course in 3D character animation last year at the college I am going to, and found great interest in it. It was a lot of fun to make, and this helped me persist with the idea of animation as a career. However, in that class, we used the Maya program. Maya is a program that many studios use to make their movies, such as Disney and Paramount. I would love to use Maya at home, but it's way too expensive. There's an alternative, however, Blender. Blender, not to be confused with the electric mixing machine in food preparation, is an open-source 3D creation toolset used for modeling, simulation, and animation. The best part is, it's free! Anyway, let's get into how I went from this to this. One of the most common ways people gain an understanding of how to use Blender is the Donut tutorial by Blender Guru. It's a free tutorial on YouTube for learning the fundamentals of Blender. To follow the trend, I looked him up on YouTube and found a series. Now, it's time to learn how to make a donut, and also learn the Blender process, I guess. Part 1 of the tutorial was just to mess around in the program, and get yourself familiar with it. Well, let's get to it then. I know it looks scary, but it is. There's so much you can do in the program, and the tutorial doesn't even cover everything you can do. It does, however, cover the basics of the program, and I can expand upon these ideas in the future. Anyway, after watching the first part of the tutorial, I made this. Part 2 showed me how to make a model for the donut. I created the donut by using a torus shape and de-shaped it a little bit. The guy in the tutorial said that if the donut was perfect, the eye would perceive it as fake. So I needed to create some flaws, and there's our donut now. Parts 3 and 4 had me sculpting the icing. Basically, I duplicated the top half of the donut and shaped it to look more like the icing. I added some drips and used the tool in the sculpt mode to make it actually look more like icing, and created this. Part 5 had me create the countertop and the coloring of the donut. The counter is made from a plain mesh, and the texture is from a third party. I filled the donut with color and wanted to use the texture paint tool to create a slight white ring around the donut to make it more realistic. Part 6 had me create sprinkles for the donut. I created 2 different types. Part 6 had me use round sprinkles. Rather than manually placing each sprinkle onto the donut, I used the geometry nodes feature and randomly placed the round sprinkles on the icing. This is how the nodes looked when I was finished. Part 7 was mostly the same as Part 6, but I created the second type of sprinkles, long sprinkles. Within these long sprinkles, I created 4 variations: small, medium, large, and curved. I used the same geometry nodes as the round sprinkles, except replaced them with the long sprinkles and tweaked the nodes a bit, with the end result being this. Part 8 had me add colors to the sprinkles, using the shading feature. Yes, it is different from the geometry nodes feature, I know it looks similar. I added some solid colors of red, blue, green, and yellow, and a metallic-looking sprinkle of white for a silver-looking sprinkle. After, I adjusted some settings to make the lighting better in the scene. For part 9, I created more of the scene. I first created the plate for the donuts to be on, using a circle mesh and expanding upon it to create a plate shape. I then duplicated the donuts, and made them look different by simply rotating them, removing sprinkles on some, and adjusting their position for the illusion of differentiation. I finally added a backdrop, making this final image. Parts 10 and 11, I created the rest of the room, to make it look like the donuts are in a kitchen setting in the early morning time. I created a simple cube around the whole scene for lighting, added a window for the sun to beam through, and added a black backdrop to get rid of the reflection, like photographers in real life. I then added some background models from a third party I imported to the scene. I then also added some sun glare to the scene to make it more realistic, using the compositing feature. It especially reflects off of the metallic sprinkles. Part 12 had me actually animating the scene. It was a simple animation of the camera moving, but it is important to start off small and then go from there. I used an empty axis to assist me in the camera movement, and empty basically means it won't show up in the final render. I created the animation of the camera moving from up to down while zooming out for a bit more of a bigger scene. I also added one more light to make the scene look better. Part 13, I was able to render the whole scene. Rendering basically means I have to have everything come together and create the final product. To do that, I checked to see if everything was able to be exported, and I adjusted some settings. Funnily enough, it is better to export through photos rather than a video, and that means exporting all 180 frames of pictures? Rendering also takes a long time, but you don't need to do anything, and you just wait for the computer to do its thing. I don't know how long it took to render all the frames, but I left my computer on overnight and finished the render. I also forgot to mention that I added one more thing to the background. I added this plant, which wasn't there previously. It's from the same website that also the wooden utensils were from. So I didn't make it, but it's an import. And so, yeah, just to make the background a little bit more unique and just to make it look better. But here's the final render before the whole video. So, yeah. Part 14, the final part, had me make the video using the photos from the rendering process. I used Blender's in-house editor to compile all the pictures together and form a video. I extended it also to 215 frames, made it 30 frames per second, and added a small black fade at the end. And now, that concludes the tutorial. And my Blender learning experience. Whew, that took a while. Well, let's see how the final product came out. It took me more than 12 hours to create only 7 seconds of film. Well, was it worth it? I think it was. Blender taught me a better understanding of 3D animation as a whole. I am excited about what I can do with the program and see what I can create. Although it was tedious and overwhelming, I feel accomplished for my efforts. Obviously, I still have more to learn, but I have a better understanding of the program. I am also very satisfied with the end result. It was overall a very enjoyable experience. Thank you to Blender Guru for the tutorial as well. Without him, I would not be able to learn Blender. And with that, my senior thesis is concluded.